There are moments in everyone's life when words intended only for superficial perception unexpectedly penetrate deep into the soul, leaving wounds that are invisible to the but felt with a burning pain under the ribs. This can happen in the blink of an eye, a chance phrase, a tone of voice, an ambiguous joke, or a gaze lingering on flaws. A person begins to endlessly scroll through what happened in their head, finding excuses and inventing ideal answers that were never spoken. This weight is carried over into sleep, and in the morning, anger flares up with renewed force. Insults have such power precisely because most people don't train their minds to see them as mere fleeting smoke. The constant thirst for approval makes us vulnerable, and even a casual remark can disturb our peace for a long time. The Stoics, well acquainted with this poison, encountered it everywhere, on the streets, in the Senate, at the foot of great empires, where envy oozed from tongues like venom. Marcus Aurelius once remarked, "Decide not to be offended, and you won't feel offended." This phrase may seem cold and overly simplistic for the modern world, but it contains a profound truth. No insult can take root if you don't fuel it with your reaction. But how can you learn to control your reaction and not allow words to cause pain? The answer to this question will open the way to peace of mind and inner strength. Imagine this. A person appears in a crowded square and, addressing the crowd, loudly pronounces your name, spewing streams of lies and slander. The natural reaction would be to rush at them, unleashing a barrage of arguments and objections in response, desperately trying to defend your reputation and explain the situation. In this tense atmosphere, the crowd becomes an observer, and its opinion wavers, because your emotional state, sweat, and shouting can be interpreted as a sign of guilt. However, if you choose a different path and remain calmly composed, maintaining silence, the situation changes dramatically. The liar is left alone with their venom, their insults hanging in the air, finding no response and causing no harm. But this requires tremendous endurance, because every cell of your being craves to protect your good name and dignity. Pride screams, demanding an immediate reaction, while dignity calls for silence and restraint. Pride seeks retaliation, while dignity erect impregnable walls against which any insults shatter. As Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." This statement is also true in relation to respect. A person desperately in need of recognition is doomed to constant dissatisfaction and vulnerability. But one who is self-sufficient and not dependent on the opinions of others cannot be deprived of what is most valuable. Remember moments from your life when someone's words caused burning pain and inner indignation. Perhaps it was a close woman, skillfully striking at the most vulnerable spot, or a boss, a friend, a random stranger on the internet whose carelessly thrown phrases pierced your consciousness like a splinter, and hours later, you are still mentally returning to those words, trying to heal the wounds inflicted on your pride and suppressing anger. In this vast world, there are people whose vocabulary seems meager and their intentions petty. Some of them resort to disparaging remarks to elevate themselves in their own eyes, to feel the superiority they so lack. Others try to get under the skin of those around them, as if testing the limits of their patience, checking how deeply their words can penetrate. And there are those who simply envy inner peace, the equanimity they cannot find within themselves. And every time a person allows themselves to lash out in response to a provocation, they inadvertently indulge their desires, proving that their caustic remarks can throw them off balance. Epictetus, the great philosopher, taught that a person's true power lies only in what truly belongs to them, in their own judgments and reactions. Everything else, in his opinion, is in the power of the external world. Insults, in essence, are just empty sounds, devoid of power if the mind does not endow them with the ability to wound. But this does not mean that you should pretend to be insensitive. A person is a person, and words can certainly cause pain, piercing the consciousness. The Stoic does not deny the existence of this pain, but accepts it as a fact. They carefully hold it in their hands, examine it attentively, and only then decide what to do. If there is some truth in the words spoken, they thank their ill-wisher for pointing out their blind spot, something they themselves did not notice. If the words are false, they simply smile in response, realizing that falsehood is powerless against a life that proves its truth in silence. Imagine a situation. Poisonous arrows of criticism are flying in your direction. You are branded as weak, arrogant, unattractive, unintelligent. Instead of an impulsive reaction, pause. Take a deep breath. Observe the offender. Notice how color floods their face because your composure disconcerts their onslaught. They long to see your anger, your confusion, beads of sweat on your brow. But instead, they receive your tranquility, and in that moment it dawns on them that you are not like everyone else. This is not about inaction, nor about turning into an insensitive stone. It is about the ability to choose where to direct your energy. Every insult you respond to only fuels the aggressor. And conversely, every insult left unattended deprives them of strength. Sometimes it is worth speaking out, but not in a fit of anger, not in a trembling voice. Speak when it is dictated by the truth, not by an inflated ego. Of course, there is a temptation to teach the offender a lesson, to put them in their place. However, the bitter truth is that most people do not learn lessons from your angry words. They begin to understand only when you refuse to stoop to their level. Your silent superiority, your endurance, wound much more deeply than any cutting replies. A philosopher who follows Stoic principles is not afraid of being misunderstood. Marcus Aurelius, one of the pillars of Stoicism, constantly reminded himself that a person has power over their inner world, over their thoughts and beliefs, but not over chaotic external circumstances. It is the realization of this fact, according to the philosopher, that gives a person true strength and steadfastness. Therefore, let those around you not understand their motives and actions. Let them whisper behind their backs, making guesses and assumptions. Let them even try to defame their name, turning it into an empty sound. If this person's life has a solid foundation based on virtue and moral principles, then their deeds will speak for themselves, drowning out any malicious rumors and gossip. If their character is pure and impeccable, then no slander can tarnish their reputation for long. It is worth thinking about those moments when you had to spend precious time and energy justifying yourself to people who do not actually respect even the truth they supposedly seek to know. Remember the arguments that left behind only a feeling of emptiness and disappointment. Remember the words that you would like to take back, realizing their inappropriateness and harm. In such moments, it may have seemed that a victory was won, only because the last word remained with you, but in reality, the battle for your own peace and mental balance was lost. Now, remember those quiet victories when you managed to restrain yourself and let the insult pass by. When you managed to simply smile in response, step aside, or remain calm while detractors writhed in anticipation of a stormy reaction, but received nothing. This is where true strength lies, strength born in silence and fueling only the person themselves, making them stronger and more confident. The great thinker of antiquity, Aristotle, once remarked that anger is a feeling available to everyone, but to restrain it, directing it to a worthy goal, to the proper extent, and at the appropriate moment is no easy task. Perhaps the offensive words thrown at you contain a grain of truth and serve as a signal for self-improvement. In this case, you should accept them as a challenge. Put on the armor of self-analysis and direct your efforts to correcting shortcomings. Like a skilled craftsman, you should work on yourself in silence and solitude, shielding the process from prying eyes and gossip. A mind impervious to insults is like an impregnable fortress, whose strength lies not in insensitivity, but in the awareness of true values. Empty words emanating from petty souls cannot affect the life of a person who works on themselves every day. The next time detractors try to get to you, let them talk. When they try to throw you off balance, remain calm. Let the poison of their malice dissolve in the air without touching your inner peace. There is no weapon stronger than the silence of a person who is confident in themselves. A fool engages in pointless arguments over every word, while a wise ruler watches as enemy arrows shatter against the walls of their fortress. Be that fortress. Be the embodiment of tranquility. Meet the attacks of detractors with a gaze full of silent dignity, in which all your superiority is contained. Remember that offensive words only reach their goal when you allow them to penetrate your consciousness. Protect your mind, control your speech, keep your peace. Insults are just trials, which are easy to pass if you remain calm and do not allow them to change you. Ultimately, they are just words, fleeting smoke. A mind capable of seeing through this smoke is invulnerable to fire. Keep your cool and let our hostile words drown in your silence.